Fridge magnets can have a variety of uses. They provide information on services we need and phone numbers to call. They remind us of places we have been while on holiday. We can show photos of loved ones or post artwork given by children. They remind us to put the bins out. They can contain words and images to inspire and amuse. Among a collection of fridge magnets, I have two favourites. One is a 1950s black and white photograph of a husband and wife with 14 children ranging in age from a teenager to a babe in arms. And the caption is, "My sexual preference is often." Before I get to my fridge magnet, at the 8 o'clock service, a member of the congregation who will remain nameless reminded me of one of her favourites, which is, "When I married Mr. Wright, I didn't realise his first name was Always." I have one of them at home. My favourite fridge magnet, however, depicts a modern equivalent of the William Holman Hunt painting of Jesus knocking on the door. And the caption is, "Jesus is coming. Look busy." Now, I appreciate the cynical humour of this fridge magnet, and it still makes me laugh when I see it. It is as if to say that what Jesus wants of us is to be busy all the time, doing what is good and right, working our guts out to save ourselves, everyone else, and the church itself. And if this is not the case, we can at least try and look as if we are achieving all this. Jesus is coming. Look busy. No thought is given to the possibility that Jesus may desire simply to be present with us and for us to welcome Jesus into our lives. Jesus is coming. Look busy. Our gospel reading this morning is the familiar story of Jesus visiting the home of Martha and Mary. It is one of several Bible passages which mentions Jesus' friendship with Martha and Mary and their brother Lazarus. And while we tend to focus on the raising of Lazarus as a point of culmination in Jesus' ministry, our reading today does not mention Lazarus. Instead, it focuses on a specific encounter between Jesus, Martha, and Mary. From the perspective of religious art, most depictions of this encounter emphasise a hierarchical relationship. Mary is sitting on the floor, looking up at Jesus, who is usually sitting on a low stool. There may be something like a bowl of fruit on the floor next to Mary. Martha is standing, looking down at Jesus and Mary, and she usually holds something like a basket of bread in her hands. Yet the Jesus and the here I go, mixing up the pages. Look at that. I should have been careful. That could have been a very short sermon. Not that anyone would complain. Oh, here we go. Here we are. A lesson for amateurs. In some depictions, Martha wears a veil, and Mary does not. And Martha usually looks older and more careworn than Mary. Some depictions include the male disciples as silent witnesses to this encounter. Such religious art gives us an idea of how this encounter is perceived. From a hierarchical perspective, Martha appears as the head of the household. She has the responsibility to ensure things are in order and that when guests arrive unexpectedly, there is something to offer. It wasn't as if Jesus could send a text ahead of time giving warning of their arrival. At the other end of the hierarchy is Mary, in repose, sitting on the floor. Mary was not engaged in household duties, but she was doing something else. Mary says nothing but listens to and engages with Jesus. Mary seems to be seeking and offering the comfort of friendship. And yes, this is the same Mary who on another occasion is seen to anoint the feet of Jesus at great expense and wipe them with her hair. Now Jesus is in the middle of this encounter and he acts as mediator. Jesus responds to Martha's complaint that Mary should help her with the many tasks. First, Jesus says that few things are needed, and then he corrects himself, saying only one thing is needed. The few things could be a reference to the custom of the day when unexpected guests arrive. One main dish, rather than many dishes, is sufficient. When Jesus says in response to Martha and Mary that Mary has chosen the better part, this seems to suggest a reverse hierarchy, that being present with Jesus with a singular focus takes priority over being worried and distracted by many household tasks. Commentators tend to suggest that Jesus gives Martha a gentle rebuke by declaring that Mary has chosen the better part, which is usually understood as listening to Jesus' teaching. Throughout the centuries, theologians have offered varying interpretations of what the better part means. Some have reinforced hierarchical thinking, suggesting that the many cares of the world are of no consequence when compared with the glory that is to come through a singular following of the life and teachings of Jesus. At best, such hierarchical thinking seeks to restore the balance between a preoccupation with our life in this world and the life of the world to come. It is an expression of future hope in a world where hope seems hard to find. At worst, though, this hierarchical thinking reinforces a sense that all that matters is our personal conviction that we are saved through a singular union with God. The many cares of the world, our everyday problems and perplexities, the struggle for peace and justice, the sustainability of human life, and the life of the planet itself is of no consequence in this view. Other theologians, together with mystics, have tended to move away from such hierarchical thinking and embrace a more circular approach. The encounter between Martha, Jesus, and Mary is a matter of balance and integration. Martha and Mary are essentially elements of our own life and well-being, and the way we engage with others and with God. They point to the need to restore the balance between action and contemplation, and they emphasize how one can support the other. Jesus is in the middle of this circular scene, seeking to restore the balance. We can consider this encounter in other ways by testing our assumptions about what could be happening between Martha, Jesus, and Mary. One assumption relates to hospitality. The assumption made by some theologians is that Martha's problem was simply her worry and distraction, and that Mary's gift was her singular focus on listening to Jesus' teaching. Yet Jesus does not invite Martha to join Mary by sitting at his feet. Jesus does not ask Martha to change her behaviour. Rather, he expresses compassion for Martha in her experience of worry and distraction. Jesus then affirms the value of what Mary is doing. Hospitality can be expressed in different ways, both preparing the comfort of food and beverage, as well as offering the comfort of rest and conversation. This relates to another assumption about what Mary was doing. A familiar interpretation is that Mary was listening to Jesus' teaching, and this itself can be seen as radical. Mary, having laid aside her domestic duties to engage in conversation with Jesus, would have been seen as unusual at the time, especially in the presence of male disciples. Yet, like Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well, the conversation between Jesus and Mary may have been on a more equal footing. After all, Jesus was visiting Martha and Mary as friends. Jesus may have come to visit Martha and Mary for a time of rest and recreation, rather than a time of teaching. Martha's appeal to Jesus to change Mary's behaviour may have ignored Jesus' need for a quiet conversation with Mary after a few action-packed days on the road. It may be that the last thing Jesus needed to see was to see his friend Martha worried and distracted. And this brings us to where the fully human Jesus fits into this and other similar stories. There are several occasions in the Gospels where Jesus withdraws from the crowd, where Jesus frees himself from the demands of those seeking answers and healing, as well as those who challenge his teachings. And this is all part of how Jesus learns to be Jesus. We see Jesus as a great teacher, yet the fully human Jesus also learns through personal encounter, whether he is alone, with one other person, in the company of the disciples, or in the middle of a crowd. One example of this, which has always struck me, is when Jesus withdraws in a boat by himself after hearing of the beheading of John the Baptist. The fully human Jesus would have experienced this as a terrible loss. And this is a time for Jesus to grieve, to rest, to sustain his own life and ministry. Jesus understood the need for balance between action and contemplation. Yet the crowd still pressed on him, and this grief gave way to compassion in more healing and teaching, and the multiplication of the loaves. In this context, Jesus' encounter with Martha and Mary can be understood as an expression of his desire to convey what he has learnt to those who seek to follow him. The way of action and the way of contemplation can be seen as a tension which often draws us to seek a new balance. In a busy life, we know that we will never get everything done, and we may feel at times that we have been too busy and there is no time for rest. We may convince ourselves also that things like rest or meditation or contemplation is a waste of time or just not our thing. The counterpoint to this are lives lived in loneliness and despair, with little engagement in meaningful activity or relationships or communities that are mutually sustaining. In contemporary language, the cost of this is that everything becomes transactional and the relational suffers. Relationships suffer, and we suffer ourselves when there is an overemphasis on a multitude of tasks. Yet the reverse can also be true. The purpose of rest and recreation is to restore our energies and make our lives and relationships sustainable and effective. The mystics show us that balance and integration is possible. We can learn, for example, to engage in ordinary domestic tasks slowly, mindfully, and even prayerfully. In times of withdrawal and quiet, we can consider what is happening on the inside of us as well as on the outside and find new insights and energy. In our everyday lives, it is not just a matter of Martha, Martha, nor is it a matter of Mary, Mary either. It can be a balance of both, Martha and Mary together, in combinations that fits our own unique way of being. When it comes to the way we engage with others, form communities and make friends, this can be a matter of appreciating each other's unique way of being and exploring how we might connect and complement each other. As our life unfolds, we may from time to time find ourselves in a position where we need to find a new balance to make our lives more sustainable. And this can pertain to our inner life, our relationships, and the communities to which we belong, including this community. My assumption is that the need and gift of a new balance is always happening, and this has an impact on our individual lives and our life in community. This may not be a matter of Jesus is coming, look busy, but rather something like Jesus is coming, look. Take a deep breath, pause, watch and wait. Consider more intentionally and more deeply who or what it is we see. Not easy to fit on a fridge magnet, I realise. And while I have studiously avoided other scriptures on offer today, there is one verse in Psalm 52 which seems to be a good alternative to Jesus' coming, look busy. Yet I am like an olive tree, flourishing in the house of God, trusting in God's steadfast love forever and ever. Amen.